Welcome back to What's Your Thought, our talk show for the youth by the youth. Today I'm joined by our pastor, Pastor Allan.
Hi.
Welcome on the show, Pastor.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about discipleship with us.
You're welcome.
So as some of you may know, our church is a church that's very centered around discipleship. We're a church that believes that men should rise up, that we are disciple men in this church. And today we're joined by our pastor, Pastor Allan. We are both disciples in this church, me and Marcus. We've been under Pastor Allan for about 4 years now. I think Marcus has been 5 years, but we've have the privilege of being discipled by Pastor Allan. So today we decided to talk about discipleship and why it's important in the current generation in order to raise up another generation of youth that will do things for God. So I'd like to ask you, Pastor, to start this off. What is biblical discipleship and what does it mean to be a disciple? And what is discipleship, the essence of it all about?
You go back to Matthew 28. Okay, we go back to Matthew 28. I think today there's this whole issue. You have Christians and then you have disciples. Okay, but I don't think that's how God meant it to be. All right. In Matthew chapter 28, it says, and I'm going to read it for you. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. Now, this is the ESV version. It removes the term disciples. All right? And I think that therein lies a lot of our problems today. If you go back to the original text, you find go ye and make disciples of all the nations, right? It doesn't ask you to teach all nations, it asks you to make disciples of all nations, right? So what is discipleship? Discipleship is Christianity. The Christian, any Christian, at whatever age, at whatever time they get saved, man or woman, are called to be disciples. So there shouldn't be a distinction, although today there is a distinction, and that is the very strong opinion that I hold.
Understood, Pastor. Now, I noticed you mentioned something that both men and women are supposed to be disciples.
Yeah.
But I was under the impression originally that discipleship is like a male exclusive thing. The 12 disciples were all male, and the Bible doesn't speak a lot about female disciples. Could you elaborate more on that, Pastor?
Okay. If you go to Luke chapter 8, you will find that the Bible says that Mary Magdalene followed Jesus, Susanna followed Jesus, and they helped out in ministry. They were considered disciples also. All right? So it's not that they were not disciples, it's that roles are different. All right? And if you go back to creation, that's the thing. The man is not more important than the woman, neither is the woman more important than the man. I think the apostles have made that clear in the epistles, right? Apostle Paul made it very clear. That it's not a matter of the man can do without the woman and the woman can do without the man. If there were no women in the world, it's fine because it's all about the man. That's the wrong concept. I think that's the problem today. People think just because we disciple men, that means we exclude women from discipleship. We are not. If that were the case, we just launch out pastors, single pastors, men. Why do we launch out couples? Why do we call them a team? Why do we make them work together to do it? Right? Because it's not that we don't acknowledge that women are disciples. What we do acknowledge is that from the very beginning, God assigned roles. The man has a role, the woman has a role. And that's what we don't want to muddle up in this whole thing about discipleship. So you have disciples growing up. The men hold certain responsibilities, the women hold certain responsibilities.
Understood, Pastor.
So then, what would you say is the difference between a disciple and a regular Christian?
There ought not to be a distinction, but unfortunately there is today. And I think in a very big way it's made Christianity very soft. It's made Christianity like there's a I'm trying to think of a term. Like, I can live a lesser Christian life because I'm not a disciple. Right? But that's not how it's supposed to be. You know, all Christians are supposed to live that ultimate and pursue that ultimate Christian life of living for God and serving God and putting Jesus first and reaching out to souls and ministering and evangelizing and building the kingdom of God. Every single Christian is called to do that. Right? But if you go to the book of Acts also, there was a distinction. You find that right smack in the early church also. There was distinctions between those who are, who were ministering, right? And those who were just receiving. And unfortunately, that has been the church world ever since.
Right. Now that we have covered biblical discipleship and what it means to be a disciple, could you then tell us what is the significance of discipleship? Why is it important?
Because of the mandate. Right? Again, we go back to Matthew 28. The mandate is not given by the church or a church. It's not even unique to our church. Right? We are a discipleship church because that's what our fellowship does. Yeah, it is what our fellowship does, but why are we doing it? Because Pastor Wayman Mitchell got up one day and he thought about it? No, it's not. This is a mandate given by Jesus. In Matthew 28, it's Jesus who's speaking, and his mandate was go into all the world, preach the gospel, raise up disciples, teach them, right? Make disciples, teach them the things I have commanded you, right? So it's a mandate given to every church. It's a mandate given to every Christian. So why do we emphasize discipleship? Because discipleship, and more specifically like what we do, is we challenge men to rise up, enables us to fulfill the mandate. If there was no mandate, then all we are doing right now is you could call it discipleship, you can call it mentoring. That's all we're doing. We're just mentoring people, right? But we disciple because of the mandate and to achieve the goals of the mandate. I don't know if I made that clear enough.
Got you, Pastor. But I noticed something that you pointed out, that this has been an issue since the early church, that people don't want to rise up. There will always be people who don't rise up. But I think now, especially in this modern generation of modern Christianity, with the feminist movement and everything, there seems to be a greater lack of disciples rising up, a greater lack of men wanting to do things, men and women wanting to do things for God. I find, especially in the modern church days, that if you come 3 services a week, it's unheard of. We've been called, our fellowship especially has been under heavy fire for having cultish, even overkill ministry standards for disciples and for men and women who want to do something for God. And what do you think, where do you think this problem started arising from, and what do you think we could do as Christianity as a whole to combat this situation?
I don't think it's new to our generation. I think this has always been an issue even from the early church. You know, one of the things that we tend to say a lot of times, and I've also found myself saying, this generation. But if you really read and study the history of the church, and you really study the book of Acts, you find that this has always been a problem. All right? We must challenge men. Men need to be challenged. Okay? Now I'll come under fire for saying something like that. But men need to be challenged. When you challenge a man, that is when men begin to rise up. In fact, if you go and read the Gospels, right? When Jesus picked his disciples, there was always a challenge. Right? Come follow me. Come follow me is a challenge. You have a choice now to make. Are you going to continue to stay back where you are, or are you going to get up, drop your nets and follow me? Right? You go all the way back to Elijah and Elisha. Elijah throws his mantle on Elisha. Elijah said, hey, can I go back and do some stuff? What does Elijah say to him? What is that to me? Right? The throwing of the mantle was a challenge. Are you going to follow me or not? Are you going to be my disciple? Elisha comes and Elijah is like, what's that to me, man? Right? And the point was, it's a challenge. So throughout the Gospels, you see this challenge. Throughout the Old Testament, you always see this challenge. Abraham was challenged to leave his father's house and follow wherever God called him to go. Moses at the bush was challenged. The burning bush, he was challenged. So you see that God always challenges men. So it's not unique to our fellowship. It's not the brainchild of our fellowship. It's just that something that Pastor Mitchell saw. And it became a revelation that, hey, that's what God does. God challenges men. And something inside a man, something inside a boy responds to challenge, and it remains dormant when it's not challenged. I don't know whether I answered your question, but
I say that's fair. That hits the nail. I think that hits the nail right on the head, Pastor. The challenge
Okay.
of discipleship. So how does one meet that challenge or find that challenge? Because challenge doesn't come to you when you're standing around and not being in church as well. From the preaching of the word, you can hear that challenge. You can feel that call. But then, how does one meet that call? Begin the journey of wanting to be a disciple, and how do you get on that path towards becoming, towards stepping out of your comfort zone or stepping out of the boat?
how do I answer that? You have to create the environment in the church. Okay? If your church doesn't have an environment where men are challenged and where boys are challenged, right? From young, they're not challenged from young. The environment is not there. Then you'll never see really men rising up. Because men respond to challenge no matter, I don't know whether it's scientific or not, but I think that they have a saying, right? The proof of the pudding is in the eating of it. I think that's the correct saying. And basically, you can see from our church, as we challenge boys and we challenge men to rise up, they rise up. We don't have a shortage of men rising up in our church. Not because we're doing anything special. We just understand that they need to be challenged. Right? So, Pastor Campbell said to me, and I think to all the pastors, and he is constantly saying it, preaching demands a response. Teaching doesn't demand a response. If all your church does behind the pulpit, all the pastor does behind the pulpit is teach you and give you knowledge, it doesn't demand a response. God didn't call us to stand behind the pulpit as pastors and teach. When we stand behind the pulpit on Sundays and Wednesday nights for us and Sunday evenings for us also, we do that. We are called to preach the gospel. And preaching demands a response. And that is why, I think even Jordan Peterson is seeing that, right? People ask, why is it all, mostly men are following you, right? I think we've heard that said a number of times about Jordan Peterson. Mm-hmm. But if you pick up both his books that I read, and he's got 3 books, more I know more, but I read 2. And when I read both the books, that I realized something. The books are very challenging, right? They give you these 12 things, and then it's basically from beginning to end, it's like telling you what you need to do, and you are kind of feel like, oh yeah, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this. So is that why? My thought is, since nobody seems to know the answer of why is it so many men want to follow Jordan Peterson, and he has such a huge group of men following Jordan Peterson, I don't think he didn't set out to do it. He has said he never set out to do it, right? I don't think he's lying, all right? So he didn't intentionally set out to do something like this. He's being honest, he's been sincere, he's just giving his knowledge out of what to help people live a successful life. Why is it men are responding to it? I think because of the way his books are structured, they're very challenging. If you read, the 12 rules for life and 12 more rules for life, the two books that I read, and I think to myself, well, all 24 are very challenging. I feel somehow when I'm reading it, I feel like I need to, oh man, I must try to memorize this. Why do I feel that way? Is this the way it's structured? So is it because it's so challenging that men are catching on to it and following? Because men naturally respond to challenge? That's a question.
I think that's really interesting, Pastor. But as you mentioned, Jordan Peterson, I also know he has another saying where he says that when you show an ideal, and that's what discipleship I think does pretty well as well. It shows you an ideal. Mm-hmm. Jesus said, "Follow me," and then Paul said also, "Follow me as I follow Christ." And I think one of the things that discipleship really, really does really well is that it shows you an ideal. That you're following this person who's got his life in order, he's got all his ducks in a row, that you would say, Pastor, and he's got everything figured out to you from your perspective. And this person is getting discipled by a person who even more has his life in order. Yeah. And you're trying to get your life in order as the person that's discipling you, and you're following the exampleship of the person in you as you're being an example to the person under you, and on and on and on and on. And what it does, it presents an ideal, and I think that's also another appeal of discipleship in our church.
Yeah, the ideal is a challenge, isn't it?
Yes.
Marcus, let me ask you then, right? You were coming to church, and but then something happens. Something happened. I figure that somewhere you were challenged. I don't know. Maybe you can answer the question for us. Now I'll interview you for a while.
What do you mean, coming to church?
No, not coming to church. Suddenly, you begin to rise up, you begin to pick up piano, you begin to do things. Why?
Well, there was a call.
Correct.
And I felt compelled to answer the call because when you see our church, you see a calling. It's like someone is calling you, or something is missing there. Mm-hmm. And you want to rise up to fill the gap that's missing there. And that could be God calling you.
Yeah. So, can we say calling is a challenge? Right?
Yeah.
Jesus said, "Follow me." Is a calling or a challenge? Interchangeably use it, I think it means the same thing. So, so that challenge goes out, and men will generally respond to challenge. Remove the challenge and start teaching them, and all the men will go to sleep, and yes, all the women will rise up, because that's naturally how women are, and that's naturally how men are. It's not going to change. Even if they come up with all the pseudoscience today, about interchangeability or whatever, it's not going to, human nature is not going to change just because science says it must change, or the pseudoscientists say it must change. Not scientists, but pseudoscientists say it must change. Challenge, right? So what is discipleship? Essentially, it's a challenge. And why do men rise up to it? Because men respond to challenge.
Understood, Pastor. You say women rise up more than men, Pastor. Does that mean women don't need to be challenged to rise up?
You know what?
Discipleship? When
God made Eve, He made her a helpmate. Is that what it says in the Bible, in the book of Genesis? Right? Mm-hmm. Somehow I knew you were going to ask me that question, but so, yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I just felt it was going to go there. God made women a helpmate. Now, it means instinctively women like to help. They like to fill in the gaps, right? They if they see something wrong, they want to fix it. That's their nature, right? It's in their nature to do it. So when men don't rise up to do something, guess who's going to fill up the gaps?
Women.
Women will naturally fill up. Will they do a good job? Probably. Can women do a better job than men? Probably. Not probably. Definitely. Right? Definitely. Women can do a lot of times the women do a way better job, because why? Because it's natural to them to be helpmates. And what do helpmates do? They think things through from A to Z, all over the place, man. They're piecing things together like a jigsaw puzzle, and then they can get it done, right? Because they're great helpmates. It's their nature to be that way. So when men don't rise up, immediately the women will rise up, fill in the gaps. Why? Because it's in their nature to do it, right? And they cannot see that, guys see their friend fall down. Let's be honest, since we're having an honest conversation. If you see your friend fall down, what's the first thing you do?
You laugh first.
You laugh first. Then you help. You'll help, but you laugh first. What's the first reaction of most women around you?
They help first.
They help first.
But then they laugh.
Yeah, then they laugh, but they'll help first. Because that's the nature. Women will do it. And that's why they do such a great job when they actually start to do something. And actually they make great disciples also. If you read the book of Luke chapter 8, it says the women followed Jesus around, and out of their spending, they supported Jesus, right? And they're great at doing that.
You heard it straight from the pastor's mouth today that pastor himself says, our church has been under fire, but a lot of times for being a male-centric church, or like a church that doesn't believe in women, or sometimes even misogynistic. But today you heard it straight from pastor. He says that women, even in discipleship, can even get things done better than men. And I think I really agree with you on that, pastor, that sometimes men need to be challenged and women will automatically do rise up. I do see that throughout church. Even in my own household, I can see my sisters are very capable and more
But does that mean you don't challenge men then? Or because the woman can do the job, so let's not do anything about it? That's not what God called us to do. God set us and created us to have roles. And there's roles of men and there's roles that women are to fulfill. And it's nothing to do with who is better and who's not. I mean, who sold you that weed, man, to smoke? Who sold you that weed? What are you smoking? No one is saying that just because we challenge men to rise up and we challenge men to lead according to the biblical principles, that we are casting aside women. We are not doing that in any way. We are following roles, spiritual roles set up by God, the one who created us, because we believe we were created. I don't believe I came from an ape. And because of that, we challenge men. And because we challenge men, it looks to the unlearned and the ignorant as though we are, casting aside women. And in no way do we do that. In no way do we do that. In no way do we lessen the importance of a woman. We actually exalt women in their role as nurturers, as helpmates. And we encourage them to do it. And we're actually helping households by challenging men to rise up and do their job, which is to lead and to protect and to serve. That's where we are coming from, or where I'm coming from rather.
Understand, Pastor. Thank you so much for your insight. We're going to take a short moment of break to get into this next segment, Emily's But Factually section. We'll be right back after this segment. I'll see you.
Hey guys, welcome back to But Factually, conducted by yours truly, me, Emily. So I've actually done a little digging about some of the disciples in the Bible, and today I would like to share with you a bit about 3 of them and how they gave up their lives and died for the Lord. So firstly, I would like to talk about is Simon Peter. So he was actually one of the first of Jesus' disciples. He was one of the most well-known disciples from the Bible and was also one of the 3 closest disciples to Christ. So historical evidence shows that during the time of Nero, Peter was actually crucified upside down. So crucifixion was actually the general means of death for Christians during the Roman Empire. And when Peter was condemned to his death, he requested to be crucified upside down because he didn't feel worthy to be perished the same way that Jesus did. And as we speak about crucifixion, I would like to talk about Andrew, the first apostle called by Jesus, who was a disciple and was also crucified as well. So he actually lived as a fisherman, where he left his life to serve as one of the 2 disciples of John the Baptist. while John was a great prophet, he sent Andrew to Jesus, referring to him as the Lamb of God. And although his death is not referred to in the Bible, but it is believed by many that he was hung on an X-shaped cross for 2 days before succumbing to his death. And third, last and final disciple I would like to talk about is James, the son of Zebedee. So actually Jesus nicknamed James Son of Thunder, as it is thought to come from the fact that he has a stormy personality, which he is easily angered and quick to judge the enemies of the Lord. James was one of the 3 disciples closest to Jesus, and because of that, he witnessed many events where the other 9 disciples did not. James's death was clearly spoken of in the Bible, where he gave up his life in martyrdom and was slain by a sword. So you see, Jesus' discipleship really had an effect on these men, that they were willing to follow Jesus even to their graves. You can see that these disciples had a heart to follow Christ, and they were called to strive to become as he is by following his commandments in mortality. That's all I have for you for Perfectually, and I'm passing it back to Keenan.
Welcome back to What's Your Thought. Thank you, Emily, for sharing with us that fact. So coming back to our gender roles, I have a reference which I would like to talk about. If you are a youth and you're watching, you probably know a bit about video games, or you play some video games. I just want to touch a bit more on the roles of our society. So, for example, we have men and women. And as an example, I'm going to use a video game. So, let's say a video game, there are many roles. There are tanks, there are damage dealers, and there are supports. I would say the closest thing to what a man does is being the tank, the front line, rising up to fill the gap. And the women are the supports. But that doesn't mean the women are not equal to the men. If the support dies, the tank will die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let's move on to the
No,
next.
that's fantastic. That's a great example. Yeah, that I think it relates to young people, and I think even old people would understand that. Older people, I won't say old people, older people.
But it's also really interesting, because in video game culture, the support is a universally hated role.
A lesser role.
A lesser
Really?
role. Yeah, even in video games right now, if you play the healer, you don't get as much like stats, you don't get the kills because you're at the back line healing, you get assists. And because of that, a lot of people want to play the damage dealers, the tanks, the more frontline roles, because you get to do more action. Whereas the supports just stay at the back, and it's become this role that's neglected. Sometimes teams even go into without supports.
That's crazy. It brings to mind, I was reading just recently, maybe a bit longer than that. King David, he's got, his men are all gathered. They've been warring for a long time, and then you had people who were injured, and then you were people who were tired, that couldn't go forward. And in one instance, and I can't remember, I'm just trying to recall. He goes, he takes his men, and it's now fewer men. They go into battle, they win the battle, right? And then they have the spoils of war, right? When you win the battle in those days, you take the spoils. So the men who went to battle said, the spoils is ours. And David was so mad at them, he was so angry with them, because he said, this is not the way we should behave. The people who stayed back to take care and support are also as important as the people who went for war. And they should share in the spoils of the war. And David, King David, one of the most machoest guys in the Bible. I mean, men of valor followed him, right? The Bible has these mighty men of valor who followed him, and did great exploits. I mean, this guy is, in our heads, this warrior of warriors, right? I mean, as a boy, he wrestled a bear and a lion and killed it, right? This king, he says to them, hey, listen, this not ought to be so, man, in the kingdom. This is a wicked way of thinking. Those who stayed back to support are as important as those who went. And so I think That's our story today. It's insane that even in the gaming world, you have this problem.
That's really interesting, Pastor. So once you find the challenge,
Okay.
I want to rise up now. Say after this conversation, we have youth right now watching this show. They say, I want to do something for God. I want to rise up. How does one find a good discipler? One person, an example, an ideal to sit under. How do you determine? Because Bible talks about wolf in sheep's clothing,
Yeah.
and I think it will be very detrimental to your walk with God if you find a discipler and he is not what it may seem to be. He thinks he has his ducks in a row. Looks can be deceiving at times, and you meet this discipler and you follow him and he just leads you down the wrong path to destruction. I think it'll be more counterproductive. It'll be better if you won't disciple at all.
So discipleship is not an online game. I said it many times, I say it again. It's not an online game. All right? It's an offline game. You have to see the people and you have to work with the people. So when I say I'm discipling you, you see me every day or every other day, you will see me. Right? You can see my life. I'm not asking you to go for an outreach and I'm not in an outreach. Right? I'm preaching all the time. My life is an open book. It's transparent. You know all the time what I'm doing. That's why a lot of pastors don't like to disciple, because it's hectic. Your life is an open book and it's transparent and everyone gets to access it. Right? Pastor, are you free? You want to go and eat? Pastor, are you free? You want to go and talk? Pastor, I have a question. Pastor, this, Pastor, that. Pastor, this, Pastor, that. It's an open book, but that's discipleship. Elijah followed him around. That's all there is to it. The 12 disciples followed Jesus around. They knew when he got up to pray, right? They knew when he went to sleep, right? They were with him all the time. And that's discipleship in a nutshell. You cannot disciple people over the phone. You cannot disciple people online. It has to be something. So then you get to assess the person who's discipling you, right? And see whether this person is worthy of discipling me, number one, or is he just playing a game, rhetoric. Discipleship is a rhetoric, right? Or is he really a genuine discipler, number one. And then then you decide whether you're going to follow that and do that. Follow him and listen to what he has said and submit to his authority. Yeah.
I think it adds one thing. Discipleship also adds that's really interesting, as you mentioned, is accountability for both you and the discipler.
Yep.
That the discipler is accountable for everything he says. He tells you to do. Immediately, he has to do that twice as well as you do it.
Exactly.
No matter what the case. And you,
Exactly.
when you step out of line, your discipler is gonna immediately edge you back in. And I think that's one of the things that's important about having a church, is that to make sure that you don't go nuts and that the people after you don't go nuts.
Correct.
So with that said, Pastor, what makes a good disciple? What are the qualities of a good disciple? I remember you preached a sermon series on this, the 7 qualities of a good disciple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah. I believe it was accountable, being a good steward. But let's summarize it. Let's summarize it. I think the term disciple comes from discipline. Right? So you're not only, when you decide that, okay, I want to be a disciple, I want to be discipled, you're saying now that I'm going to participate in a discipline. Okay, and then I'm going to discipline myself to it. Right? Because it takes a lot of discipline. Right? We have morning prayer. We say disciples need to be there at morning prayer. Does that mean, that means other Christians don't need to come to church to pray? Of course not. Like I said, every Christian is supposed to be a disciple. Everyone is supposed to come and pray. But since it is the way it is, we work with what we have. So we challenge the disciples. Say, hey, listen, you better get up and you better be here to pray. So you have that discipline. So if you want to be a good disciple, then you need to be very disciplined. You are choosing to say, you know what, I'm going to allow this person to speak into my life. You're going to firstly allow the person to speak into your life, and then I'm going to submit to the person. That means, you know what is submission? Submission starts not when the person is asking you to do everything that you want to do. Submission only starts when the person asks you to do something that you don't want to do. Right? Right? Same like people say faithfulness, he's a faithful husband. Well, he's not really faithful until he's been tested. Right? So same thing with submission. You're not really submissive until you're asked to do something that you generally don't like to do. Right? And you do it out of submission. And when I say that, or people can take that to one extreme, what if he tells you to jump off the building? Well, use your brain. Right? Nobody's asking you to shut your brain off. Right? But the point of the matter is you're choosing to listen to the person, allow the person to disciple you. So the best disciple is the one who's willing to listen to the discipler and allow him to speak into his life.
It's really interesting, Pastor. Thank you for your insight. So lastly, Pastor, now let's look at continuity. You speak a lot about posterity, about continuing on. So now I'm being discipled under this discipler, and I want to disciple someone else. I've been discipling under, because discipleship is an on and on and on.
Yeah.
Being under someone's example and being an example to someone else at the same time. How do I go make that transition from being a good disciple to becoming a good discipler as well?
Once your life is disciplined enough to disciple someone, so you must make sure you have a very structured life. I like how Jordan Peterson likes to say, get up and make your bed. First thing you do, and it's great because I've been doing it from the time I was a teenager. I get up and make my bed. That's the first thing I do. Never realized what I was doing, but somehow I guess it's right. You begin to form a lifestyle of discipline when you begin to do stuff, simple things like that, right? So once you discipline your life and you feel that now I can be a model that someone can follow, and I'll be a good model, a good role model in today's layman's term, role model, right? Then you should start finding someone to disciple, come along with you, who's just hanging at the fringes of Christianity, and you say, hey, listen, man, follow me, man, as I follow Christ. I'm going for morning prayer. I'll come pick you up. Right? I still remember as a disciple, that's the thing I used to do. I used to get up at like 5:30 in the morning, and I used to start at 6 in the morning in my car, and go all the way. Firstly, I remember driving to Old Klang Road. My wife now, but my girlfriend then, my fiance then, pick her up and then come back to Kampung Tunku and pick up another guy, and then go to section 4 and pick up a guy, and then go to Kampung Tunku and pick up another guy, and then come back all the way and be in church by 7 o'clock for prayer. Hey, follow me, I'm going for prayer, I come pick you up. Or hey, listen, I'm going to go up to church, I'm going to go up, service is not started yet, let's go up to the prayer hall and let's pray. Right? Hey, would you like to follow me? I'm going to follow up on a new convert. Then they're watching you and they're learning from you, right? And then you're making a new generation of somebody else who can also down the road begin to do what you are doing. So that's the beauty about discipleship. It ensures posterity. It ensures that your church is around for as long as Jesus tarries, because you always got another generation of people who know what to do. They know how to come and pray. They know how to follow up. They know how to reach someone. They know how to evangelize, right? I know Marcus and you I'm sure you know that. And you know that, right? You learned to do that, and then now you both are doing it also. You're getting people to come along with you, correct? How has that gone for y'all, by the way, since we are talking?
Pretty good, Pastor. I seem to have hopefully captured your spirit, Pastor, the zeal to evangelize and to reach out to people. And I've been able to do that. I've had the privilege of being able to drag people along with me when I want to do my own crazy outreaches. I'll drag people along with me, and it feels like I'm being more challenged, despite having to rise up to meet the standard. he feels that as I challenge someone else, I am more challenged by my own challenge.
Yeah. What about you, Marcus?
I am challenged to challenge other people.
Yeah.
Well, I have also noticed a big change in our church.
Yeah.
People started sitting in front when we started to sit in front.
Correct? Did you notice that? I thought I was the only person that noticed that. When you guys started coming to sit in front, suddenly now all the youth are coming to sit in front. That's part of discipleship. Yeah. What else did you notice?
Seems like outreach has been more vibrant. We just finished one.
This morning.
Yeah.
Rock and roll, man.
Guitar or youth out there, young
Yeah.
people out on a Saturday morning, not sleeping at home,
Yep.
doing something,
Yeah.
giving out flyers, inviting people to church. Something money can't buy.
Yeah. So I think you guys yourself see the benefits of that. And you know what you've done? You've ensured that once I'm gone, I mean, I can't be around forever. I'll die one day. But you've ensured that another generation will continue after you. Now the important thing is that they need to do what you guys are doing. That's the power of discipleship. That's the power of it. It ensures posterity. And so let's make it clear. It's not only the men are doing this. The ladies need to do this also. Ladies need to go out and reach out to younger ladies, right? And begin to teach them. In fact, if you go to the book of Acts, Apostle Paul teaches you to do that. Teaches the older women to reach out to, the younger women and to teach them. And that's discipleship. So it's not really just a man's game. It's both a man and a woman's game, because we believe in men and women as Christians, right? That there are genders and that there are roles to fulfill. And so both the men and women need to do that.
Well, I think we've come to an end of our episode. Before we end, is there anything you would like to share to maybe a new Christian or a new disciple or someone that wants to be a disciple? Any tips?
Don't go with the flow. That means the current idea of I'm a Christian. Be a disciple. If you just got saved, be a disciple. You just gave your life to Jesus Christ. You know what I love about Jesus? He always did that to people, man. I mean, the woman at the well, right? He just unleashed her, man. She went out and began to evangelize to everybody. The demoniac, can I follow you? No, you can't follow me. Right? By the time Jesus goes a full circle and comes back to Decapolis, everyone is running out to meet Jesus. Why? Because this demon-possessed guy is in his right mind, sane and sharing the gospel. Right? I mean, he just immediately unleashed you. You didn't have to go to seminary for 50 years or 3 years or 10 years or whatever. Just unleashed you, man, to do it, right? So I say to Christians straight away, man, say, I'm not just going to be a nominal Christian. I'm going to be a disciple, and I'm going to go up to my pastor and I'm going to tell my pastor, please disciple me. And if it's a woman, go up to your pastor's wife, tell your pastor's wife, sister, I want to be used by God. Can you show me what it is to, be a woman of God? And sheesh, no telling what will happen, man.
It's awesome, Pastor. So before we close, I'd like to have some announcements. We do have services. Come and be discipled at one of our services. For more information, our church address will be over there. I think it's in frame. Is it in frame? Over here. And then Pastor's number will be over here. Martin will edit this in post-production. And then our service times will be over here. Or maybe on my face. Or maybe somewhere here. Like whatever fits in frame, over Marcus. And for more information, you can see our numbers, me and Marcus's and Brian's numbers for youth events, probably over here, wherever there's space on the screen right now. I don't know what Martin's doing behind the scenes, but hope to see you guys back for our next episode of What's Your Thought. Thank you again, Pastor Allan, for being on the show. This was a very fruitful conversation. Okay, we'll see you guys on the next episode of What's Your Thought.
you.